In Canada, the challenge of making friends doesn't appear in loud or dramatic ways. It emerges quietly, almost invisibly, in the soft spaces between conversations, in the long pauses where Americans expect a bridge but instead encounter gentle distance. The landscape looks familiar, the language is shared, the cultural references overlap, yet something in the social rhythm feels just out of reach. For many Americans, the difficulty isn't obvious at first. It shows itself slowly, like a delayed echo of cultural contrast. In a country known for politeness, warmth, and calm, the real shock comes when connection deep, lasting connection unfolds far more slowly than expected. At first, what stands out is the surface friendliness. Canadians greet others with a measured kindness that feels effortless. A cashier asks how the day is going with genuine ease. A stranger holds the door a beat longer than necessary. Neighbors wave from driveways with a soft, relaxed familiarity. It creates an atmosphere that seems ideal for forming friendships. But beneath that warmth lies a quieter, more reserved approach to social life, one built on respect for boundaries rather than quick emotional entry. Many Americans, who come from a culture where small talk flows freely and acquaintances blur quickly into casual friendships, notice a subtle emotional restraint. Conversations stay light for longer. Invitations rarely come early. People seem content to coexist without rushing into deeper connection. Over time, these early impressions settle into clearer cultural distinctions. Canadian social norms emphasize consideration and non-intrusion, creating an environment where people rarely impose themselves on others even socially. Friend groups tend to form early in life, reinforced by school connections, long histories, and tight-knit communities shaped by shared winters and collective habits. Newcomers, especially adults, often step into a landscape where social circles are strong but not aggressively open. This isn't coldness. It's cultural modesty, a preference for steady familiarity over rapid intimacy. In a society where politeness protects space rather than fills it, silence isn't awkward. It's respectful. And this restraint can make friendship feel like a long, slow thaw. Common situations highlight this quiet social architecture. At workplaces, colleagues are friendly yet measured, offering support without immediately extending social invitations. Neighborhood interactions feel warm but cautious, shaped by an unspoken rule against overstepping. Even in group settings, conversations revolve around shared experiences rather than personal stories. An American might interpret the absence of bold enthusiasm as disinterest, not realizing it reflects a cultural preference for emotional privacy. Friendly chats in a cafe remain just that pleasant, brief, and complete within the moment. Social kindness appears constantly, but it doesn't automatically evolve into personal closeness. In Canada, relationships grow through consistency, repeated encounters, shared routines, and the slow accumulation of trust. These norms gradually reshape the mindset of many Americans living in Canada. Over time, the expectation of fast connection softens. People learn to navigate the quiet spaces, to appreciate the depth that comes from patience rather than momentum. The emotional climate encourages slower conversations, steadier rhythms, and friendships formed through repeated presence rather than instant rapport. Many Americans find themselves adopting a calmer approach to social life, valuing subtle gestures over overt enthusiasm. They become more comfortable with pauses, more attuned to understated warmth, more aware of how trust develops in a culture that doesn't rush it. And in that shift, they begin to see how deeply Canadian values of privacy, humility, and quiet respect shape the emotional landscape of friendship. When friendships finally do form, their character reflects these cultural foundations. They are steady, reliable, and deeply rooted. Canadians tend to maintain long-term relationships built on consistency rather than frequency. Bonds develop slowly but hold firmly, marked by loyalty and a strong sense of mutual support. For Americans, the transformation lies in learning to move at that pace, adjusting expectations, and finding comfort in subtlety. And in this shift, a deeper realization emerges: friendship in Canada isn't scarce, it's simply slow. Shaped by a culture that values gentle boundaries, emotional privacy, and trust earned quietly over time, the cultural differences become even more visible once the initial politeness gives way to the quieter reality of how Canadians form and maintain relationships. Many Americans arrive with the instinct to create quick social bonds, a habit shaped by a culture where casual friendships start easily. Workplace relationships evolve rapidly, and social interactions lean toward openness. But in Canada, connection unfolds more like a gradual unfolding than a spark. It's not reluctance, it's rhythm. a rhythm shaped by subtle social cues, community patterns, and a national temperament built on moderation. One of the first things Americans notice is how rarely conversations skip directly into personal territory. In the United States, emotional sharing often serves as a first step toward building trust. People talk openly about their goals, frustrations, or recent challenges as a way to bridge unfamiliarity. But Canadians tend to build trust before revealing much at all. Emotional disclosure arrives slowly, offered only after repeated interactions have created a sense of stability. What appears as distance is often simply caution and effort to avoid overwhelming others, or appearing intrusive. This restraint creates a social environment defined by careful pacing. Even when interest is there, enthusiasm stays subtle. Warmth shows through reliability, through many small moments rather than one dramatic gesture. These differences appear in daily life, places where Americans expect friendship to begin effortlessly. A coworker who chats every morning at the coffee machine may never extend an invitation after work. A neighbor who helps shovel a driveway without being asked may return inside immediately afterward, seeing the gesture as community spirit rather than a doorway to deeper social connection. Social norms favor quiet helpfulness and respectful distance rather than immediate familiarity. In Canada, kindness and closeness aren't linked in the same way. Someone can be incredibly friendly without signaling the start of a personal relationship. Many Americans misread this polite buffer as a closed door when it is simply a cultural pause. That pause stems from values deeply rooted in Canadian life: modesty, patience, and a reluctance to assume intimacy before it's earned. As time passes, Americans begin to witness the structure of Canadian social circles. Many were formed in school, reinforced through long winters, community rituals, and years of steady companionship. These groups open slowly, not out of exclusion but because their foundation lies in shared history. Entering them requires time, consistency, and a kind of gentle persistence. Showing up repeatedly at community events, workplace gatherings, or neighborhood activities becomes part of the unspoken process. In Canada, reliability is the social currency that builds trust. People watch how others move through daily life, how they treat shared spaces, how they navigate conflict. It's a culture where friendship is not declared quickly but allowed to emerge through familiarity. This rhythm shapes emotional expectations. Americans often feel an early loneliness in Canada, not because people are cold, but because relationships take longer to transition from surface-level friendliness to deeper connection. They notice that invitations, when they come, are sincere and meaningful. A casual lunch may be the result of weeks or months of gradual rapport. A gathering at someone's home is rarely spontaneous. It reflects a level of trust that Canadians extend thoughtfully. And once inside those circles, the atmosphere carries a comforting steadiness, a kind of emotional predictability that contrasts with the faster, more fluid social patterns many Americans are used to. Over time, this slow-building trust begins to reshape the emotional environment in which Americans navigate daily life. The urgency to connect fades. Social interactions feel calmer, less performative, less pressured. In workplaces, measured friendliness begins to feel like stability. In neighborhoods, quiet routines become pathways to recognition. In public spaces, the subdued social climate fosters a sense of ease rather than isolation. Canadians may not immediately pull newcomers into their private world, but they create a sense of belonging through consistent small gestures, the same gestures visitors often notice in their earliest days without understanding the deeper cultural logic behind them. Eventually, Americans begin adapting to this rhythm. They learn that friendship here relies less on bold social openness and more on showing up in small, steady ways. They begin to appreciate the slow deepening of connection, the comfort of relationships built on trust rather than speed, and the quiet loyalty that emerges once those bonds finally form. The transformation is subtle but profound, reshaping not only how they understand Canadians but how they understand the process of friendship itself. As months turn into years, the slow-blooming nature of Canadian friendship reveals its deeper cultural meaning. What once felt like distance begins to look more like intentionality. Relationships are not rushed because they are taken seriously. Emotional privacy is not a barrier but a way of honoring personal boundaries. And the calm cadence of social interaction creates an atmosphere where trust grows quietly, without pressure or expectation. For many Americans, this becomes a shift in worldview. Friendship stops being something pursued quickly and becomes something cultivated with care. This shift touches daily life in unexpected ways. Workplaces feel more grounded once the rhythm becomes familiar. Canadians tend to separate professional and personal spheres more clearly, not because they are unfriendly, but because they protect their time and emotional energy. Many Americans eventually notice how this adds stability. Coworkers are supportive, collaborative, and respectful, even if they don't immediately become friends outside the office. The boundary is not a wall, it's a structure meant to keep relationships steady rather than overstretched. Neighborhoods reveal the same tone. People wave, offer help, and maintain a warm civility, but closeness arrives only after months of repeated interactions. The environment fosters a sense of community without assuming immediate intimacy. And in that balance, Americans begin to understand the Canadian preference for quiet coexistence. Anecdotal moments illustrate how this cultural pattern is lived every day. On snowy mornings, neighbors help dig out one another's cars without lingering afterward for conversation. In parks, friendly exchanges remain short and light, not because people are indifferent, but because politeness here means respecting another's space. In social gatherings, Canadians tend to wait for invitations to deepen conversations rather than leading with personal stories. Even humor reflects this mindset: gentle, self-deprecating, and modest, revealing warmth only when the comfort of the group has fully settled. These are not walls but soft social edges, gently protecting the pace at which connection forms. They create a cultural environment where friendships are rare not because they are difficult, but because they are meaningful when they finally take shape. For Americans who remain long enough, this environment slowly transforms their own habits. Many begin to move through daily life with less urgency. Interrupting conversation feels less natural. Speaking loudly in public spaces becomes less common. They find themselves allowing silence to breathe, rather than rushing to fill it. And more importantly, they begin to see friendship differently. A relationship built slowly now feels more secure, more rooted, more deliberate. The Canadian approach teaches patience, the understanding that trust is not a performance, but a steady presence. People start to value the emotional steadiness around them, the quiet consistency that Canadians offer once connection is established. Eventually the change becomes internal. Many Americans describe a kind of emotional grounding that emerges from living within this slower social rhythm. The pressure to be constantly engaging fades. The expectation of immediate closeness dissolves. And the friendships that do form tend to feel enduring, shaped by authenticity rather than momentum. The cultural contrast becomes a lesson in itself, that meaningful connection does not always need speed, intensity, or expressive openness. Sometimes it needs quiet repetition, shared environments, and the willingness to let relationships grow at the pace of trust. And as this realization settles, a final reflection often comes into focus, one that lingers long after the initial culture shock fades. Canada shows that friendship can be gentle, steady, and deeply loyal without being quick to appear. It reveals the strength of modest connection, the beauty of slow emotional unfolding, and the unexpected richness that comes from cultures that value respect before intimacy. For many Americans, this understanding reshapes not only how they see Canada, but how they see friendship itself.